All right, so it's just me again this week. Everybody is busy. It's the beginning of summer, last days of school, things like that. So people are out and about and bouncing around. So I'm going to make this really short, probably, possibly the shortest episode we've ever had. I haven't watched a whole lot. I did. I traveled all week, and what happens when I travel is I usually tend to travel all the way across the country on flights that have layovers. So it takes me a little longer to get from point A to point B when I'm traveling. So I spend a lot of time on the plane. And the nice thing about modern air travel is that you get to watch movies. And so I watched a ton of movies. So I'll try to go through them real quick and let you know what I've seen. There's a few that are more topical. The one behind me is the last one, actually the second to last one I watched, but I watched it on my trip back on Friday. The other one that I watched on Friday was called Operation Fortune, so I'll talk about that too. But to kick it off, the first film that I watched on my way out to California was 65, starring Adam Driver. It is effectively a movie where Adam Driver is from a pre-human race of humans, like a pre-Earth race of humans, and they're traveling the outer reaches of space or the inner reaches of space or all of the reaches of space. And so he leaves his family behind. His daughter was very sick and they needed money, so he hires on as a transport pilot. So he's transporting these families that are in cryosleep from, point A to point B. His ship gets pulled into this big asteroid belt, and he gets hit. The ship essentially falls apart and crashes on this planet, and so he crash lands on Earth. But it's since he is from this advanced older race, they're crashing on prehistoric Earth. So he crashes, he comes to, he's the only one, he's actually in the process of giving up. Like he's as far as he knows, he's the only one that survived. And he's sending out these distress messages to try and let his people know that the the craft crashed and that everybody's behind, and nobody's coming. So he actually goes as far as sitting outside with a rifle in his hand. He's about to, off himself because he doesn't really have any other option. He doesn't know what to do. And right as he's about to, or actually right after he's about to, because he's going to do it, and he fights back, or some part of him fights back at the last second. And he goes back to the ship, and an alarm goes off, and it turns out that one of the pods that he was transferring is still online and functional. And so he goes and finds it. It's a little girl. So now we have this kind of whole story of how his he left his daughter who was sick, and now he's got this girl that he needs to protect. So that's the gist of the story. After that it becomes surviving a fight against the dinosaurs and all that stuff. So it's a fun action movie. It's really light on plot. There's a few little twists in there that if you really think about it, aren't too shocking. And then it comes to its inevitable conclusion. I think it's a decent action movie if you love dinosaurs and running around. But the science fiction part of it, you kind of lose a lot of the science. It's just him running around with a rifle trying to protect this girl and survive until they figure out a way to escape. So if you like the idea of like a survival thriller, then it's much better. On Rotten Tomatoes, I look at it, it's got a 35% from the critics, but a 65% from the audience. I don't, with this one, it's a pretty broad spectrum, but I think I probably fall kind of right in the middle. The work that Adam Driver did, the work that the girl did was good. But just running from fake dinosaurs in fake 65 million years ago Earth until you can get yourself off of the planet, only so interesting. The relationship between Adam Driver and the girl is solid. He's kind of becoming something of a father figure to her. You have some flashbacks where he's dealing with how he dealt with the the illness of his daughter, and so that one's interesting. But I mean, there's nothing in it that is particularly special, other than the special effects are solid. So it's, I mean, again, it's a good action thriller movie, but it's not rewriting the genre in any way. So check it out if you've got access to it. You know, I wouldn't say to go rent it or pay for it. It's short. It's an hour and 30 minutes, which is usually a marker for me that a movie isn't great. Um, it just tends to be something where it feels like somebody wrote the script that they had to that somebody wanted them to write in a certain, you know, number of pages, and they did it and they produced it, and now we have 65. So yeah, I didn't hate it, didn't love it. It was fine. On the next leg of my travels, my next flight, I caught Searching and Missing. And I can't remember if it was Kim or Jen, but one of them watched Searching not long ago and they enjoyed it. And I think I did too. These are both similar movies. They're kind of spiritual successors and they live in the same universe. So the idea behind them is that they're all told from what amounts to the laptop view of the universe. So Searching was filmed in 2018. I think it takes place around there. To be fair, I don't totally remember. But the idea behind it is that this man, played by John Cho, of, you know, Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle fame, he lost his wife, so it's just him and his daughter. They're really close, and then one day she just kind of up and disappears. And so the way the story unfolds, it's him searching literally the internet and using the internet as a tool to find his daughter. So we see all of his messages from his computer screen. So iMessage, we see his emails, we see him doing FaceTime calls from his computer. So everything takes place from the angle of the desktop of his computer, which is a really kind of neat and interesting concept. And I think it worked really well. The cast is pretty tight. It's a John Cho, Deborah Messing, in a role that I haven't seen from her too often. She usually does comedy, and I'm not necessarily her biggest fan. And some of that stems from a couple of other reasons that I won't get into here. But you know, she's usually a comedian, and she's usually funny. You know, she's fine. But in this, she plays the lead detective, and at first, I didn't quite buy it. Like I didn't feel it. But the longer the movie goes on, the more you start to feel like she fits into the character that she's got. So I actually thought they did a pretty good job casting her there too. I really don't recognize the other actors in the film. The guy that plays John Cho's brother is Joseph Lee, and he was in Beef as Ali Wong's husband. The daughter, her name is Michelle Law. She was great in it. She was really solid. I don't remember her very well. Or sorry, I haven't seen her in much. Yeah, she hasn't been in a whole lot. So I thought she did a good job, though. I wouldn't mind seeing her in some more stuff. I think she has some skill there. But yeah, it's a really interesting movie. It really unfolds in a, like I said, a very cool way. There's some plot twists in there, some things you really, I don't think, predict. It's not a particularly um predictable film. Like it's going a certain way, and sometimes you feel like you've got something figured out, and it gives you those breadcrumbs, and you're right there with them, and you think you've got it, and then it gives you that little twist, and it turns out you're wrong. So I thought it worked really well. It was a really interesting film. And then the next one I caught was Missing, and to say they're related is debatable. I think they're in the same universe. So in the opening of Missing, we see that the film, or on the TV, that she's watching footage of the story that unraveled uh, in Searching. So we can see that that's happening. So this one is done the same way. It's the angle of the computer, and we're seeing everything as it happens to her. And so in this one, it's the daughter. and her mom goes on vacation with her husband, or her new boyfriend, played by Ken Lung. The mom is Nia Long. And so they're, the daughter's, she's a very teenage daughter. She, loves her mom, but doesn't necessarily get along great with her mom. She gets a little, pissy with her mom sometimes. And so when she knows her mom's leaving town, she's going to party. And the girl is played by Storm Reed, who was in The Last of Us. And she's great. She plays a fantastic teenager, but the same story unravels. So she parties too hard where her parents are gone. She has to go to the airport to pick them up. She's at the airport. Her parents never show, or sorry, her mom and her boyfriend never show up. So the rest of the film, as it unravels, is her trying to figure out what happened to her mom. So they were in another country. And so the first thing, she's trying to work with the embassy. She's trying to figure out, where they were, if she can get video footage of where they were. And it's really cool. It's really trippy. It's in the same way, but the plot twists generally work. Although I felt like the big plot twist in this one was a bit of a big swing in compared to the plot twists in the first one. And I felt like their big reveal was a little corny. This one did pretty well on Rotten Tomatoes, about as well as the other one, but I liked it less. I really did think that their big twist for this one was not as creative. It felt a little cheesy, but it ultimately worked. It was still suspenseful. It was exciting. It was interesting. And to see this thing still play out the same way, it's a really creative way, I think, to make probably a low budget film. You're filming everything from the point of view of a computer and the cameras. You don't have to worry too much about sets. Although the second one does have a couple of set pieces where they definitely needed to do some location filming and things. But so, keeping that in mind, Searching was filmed for under $1 million. It was only $880,000, and it made $75 million when it was out. So, that's a pretty profitable film. So, keeping that in mind when you're looking at how they created this and how much money they made, they kind of killed it. The Missing looks like it had a bigger budget of 7 million, but it made almost 50 million. So the fact that they had to have these set pieces and the things that they did definitely ate into their profits a little bit. But if you make $48 million and you spend 7 million, that's $41 million. That's still a reasonably profitable film. So I think I wouldn't be surprised if there's something else in this genre soon. The advantage that they have, like I said earlier, is that it's not, yes, it's in the same universe, but they don't rely on each other at all. So you could make one that's not in the same universe and just film the same way and still be fine. This could be like the next coming of the found footage film, in that it's simple, it's easy to make, and you just need to spend some time, but it really works out. So we'll see if there's another one coming. I don't see anything out there yet, but we'll see what happens there. All right. So even though I watched Operation Fortune last, I'm gonna go with this one next. I watched this one at the tail end of the trip. It's about a 2-hour film. It's a Guy Ritchie film, so if that tells you anything, you kind of get an idea of what's coming. It's Guy Ritchie and Jason Statham as your main character. I'll say this right off the bat: it is not my favorite Guy Ritchie film. I like Guy Ritchie. I think Snatch, I think Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels are magnificent films. I think they're fantastic action comedies. I think if you watch something like, I remember sitting in the theater and the trailer for his King Arthur movie came on, and I knew instantly from watching the trailer, without any context or anything, that it was a Guy Ritchie film. There was a certain feel to that, and it seems like maybe after that he pulled back from that, because this definitely does not have some of the cinematography and some of the camera work that he usually does. That to me is a signature Guy Ritchie, and that almost takes away from it, because the plot itself isn't particularly brilliant. It's definitely an action movie. There's a plot twist or whatever in there, but it's not brilliant. It's not so great as, again, something like Snatch or even Lock, Stock. The cast is solid. I like Jason Statham. Aubrey Plaza's in it, who I think is fantastic. Um, but she's a little subdued here too. Like she's not quite as over the top as I like to see her. She does crazy really well, and she wasn't as dramatic as she was in something like White Lotus. So, she didn't get the opportunity to be as funny as she can. And this was a comedy, so I'd have liked to have seen it. Another actor that I really enjoy that was in this and did a solid job is Carrie Ellis. And then the real scene stealer, and I think I have heard this about another movie that he did recently, but was Hugh Grant. He plays kind of the villain of the film, or at least the guy that feels like the villain through most of the film. And and I thought he did a really, really good job. He's far more charismatic than I used to ever give him credit for. So he really chews up the scenes that he's in. But this is ultimately a Guy Ritchie special, right? Like Guy Ritchie kind of deals in the heist films, and this is sort of almost like a reverse heist in that the film opens up with something is stolen, and the interesting part here is that we don't know what was stolen. So there's something that's been taken. The government hires Jason Statham and his team, or Carrie Elvis actually in his team, which is Jason Statham and Aubrey Plaza and this guy Bugsy Malone, and his character's name is JJ, and he's actually really great too. I like them all, but yeah, they hire them to go recover it, and so they have to kind of follow the trail of clues and figure out what it is, who's selling it, why they're selling it, all that. And again, as I kind of think of it like a reverse heist film. So instead of them being the ones stealing it, they're doing kind of a little bit of the fun detective work to figure out who stole it, why they stole it, and all that. And that's, I mean, after that, the plot moves. It's solid. It's got a couple of twists that are decent, and there's a ton of action, and it's fun. I mean, Jason Statham does his Jason Statham thing. I totally forgot to mention that Josh Hartnett is a main character in this, and I like him too. He plays kind of a bumbling movie star that's trying to blow up, or already has blown up, but is working on his next big thing, and they kind of blackmail him into helping them because they can use him as an actor to get him in the door. And so it's fun. It's not a great movie, like I said, but it works. I would rather, given the opportunity to sit down and watch Snatch than watch this. But Rotten Tomatoes, the critics gave it a 50%, the audience gave it 82%, and I would probably put it again right in the middle. It's probably like a 6. If I'm putting it on a scale of 1 to 10. It Every actor is relatively charismatic, but they're also a little more subdued than I'm used to seeing them, especially with a Guy Ritchie film, except for Hugh Grant. Hugh Grant just kills on screen all the time. I would have liked to hear more from Jason Statham. I think he benefits from having somebody to really banter with. And for as great as Carrie Ellis usually is, that was probably the only guy that he really got that from, and it didn't quite work the way that it usually does. Josh Hartnett, like I said, was in it, and I actually thought he was really great. I see him kind of making a resurgence right now and trying to come back into the larger cinematic picture, and I think he did a good job here. So if you're looking for some fun, you're looking for some action, you just want to watch something and have a good time, watch some stuff blow up, and a couple of chase scenes and some gunfights, and again, Jason Statham kicking and punching his way through stuff. It's solid, and so I would say give it a watch. If again, it's kind of like 65. If it's there and you're not paying for it, and you've got the time, give it a watch. This one's almost 2 hours, and it probably is, unlike 65. It probably could have been a hair shorter, but it worked. It was entertaining. I didn't hate it. So go give it a watch. The last thing now that I'll get to that I watched was the Fablemans, starring Michelle Williams and Paul Dano. Although the main character is played by a young man named Gabriel LaBelle. I thought he was fantastic. He really did some really good work, and I liked him a lot. I would like to see more from him. Funny enough, I was looking up the kind of real pictures because so the story of the Fablemans is it is a semi autobiographical retelling of Steven Spielberg's childhood and him, or more accurately, him becoming a filmmaker, which started at a very early age. And so the guy that plays Spielberg in his later teens is Gabriel LaBelle, and he did a great job. He was really, really good. I think this kid's going to have a nice long career. You got kind of what you expect out of Michelle Williams and out of Paul Dano, but they were, it was really good. Just the overall film itself, before you break it down at all, is very stylized. It takes place in the 50s and 60s. It looks like the 50s and 60s beautifully. The soundtrack's great. The kind of the grittiness of the feel, well filmed in, um, with modern technology, still gives you that kind of gritty 50s, 60s feel. So I thought that was really great. So the way the film goes is, Sammy Fableman, not Steven Spielberg. The character's name is Sammy Fableman. So all of the names have been changed to protect the innocent, or whatever you say when you're making a movie. But in the film, his name is Sammy Fableman, and instead of Steven Spielberg, right? A young Jewish kid in the 50s, which couldn't have been an easy time. You're right after the end of World War One, anti-Semitism across the world. Even though we took down Germany, who was obviously incredibly anti-Semitic, but some of that stuff still permeated across the world. So as he's growing up, he is dealing with some hate, even though, obviously unwarranted. You can't really hate somebody just for being, and yet people do. So, that definitely comes up during the film. But when he's very young, he's 6 years old. The first movie he goes to see is called The Greatest Show on Earth. And this is, in the film, this is what he goes to see, but also in real life, this is the first movie that Steven Spielberg ever saw. So what I came to find out looking this up is, yes, things are embellished. Yes, things are, beautified and put through this lens of, of modern technology, maybe, and just wanting to tell the story that the way that he sees it now versus the way he lived it, there's probably some embellishment there, and he admits to that, but it's really, really accurate. Like, if you were to outline the story of Steven Spielberg's childhood, literally all those points are in this film. So it's really accurate in that way. So the first film that he sees in the movie, the first film that Steven Spielberg saw when he was a kid, The Greatest Show on Earth. And that film has a train crash scene that when you watch the movie, you can see how it's made. Like, you can tell that they used a model train, they used a toy car, they use these things that were available to them because special effects weren't really a thing, in the 50s. And so he's watching this, and it really struck him. And so, in the film, and again in real life, he goes home and he takes a Lionel train set, sets it up, and to get this scene out of his head, because it really bothered him, he recreates it and films it himself in 8mm, and goes through this whole thing. And this is the genesis of Sammy Fableman, Steven Spielberg, as a filmer, as a filmmaker. And so this starts this obsession that he has with creating and watching films. What was really interesting is that they really, I mean, Spielberg's the one making the movie, so you expect a certain level of accuracy, and it seems like they really kind of nailed it with his parents. His mom was a former piano player who retired to raise the family. So in the film, she's playing the piano. She's an artist. She's, a little zany, a little wacky. She's really cool. And Steven Spielberg's father, who, looking at the side-by-side pictures, is a fantastic casting of Paul Dano versus of Arnold Spielberg, who is obviously Steven Spielberg's father. But they're very similar in appearance, and it may just be the hair and the glasses, and that's enough. But it's kind of neat. I think when we look at Michelle Williams side by side with Steven Spielberg's mom, we're casting somebody a little younger and a little more beautiful. But she does a really great job being that kind of flighty character. Seth Rogen has a great turn in here as Uncle Benny. The character in real life was named Bernie, so they didn't stretch too far in that. And all the dynamics between um, Sammy's mom, dad, and Uncle Bernie are all the real life dynamics that they had. So mom was the zany kind of piano player and artist, and you can definitely see how that influenced Steven Spielberg. But his dad was also a super workaholic. He worked in computer development. He worked on a bunch of stuff, and he was working all the time. And so some of that work ethic and some of that analytical nature, even though they talk about in the film how he never was much of a mathematician, I think that that analytical mind, you can see that taking hold in him applying it to movies instead of mathematics or computing. So I thought that was really interesting, and the way that life goes for them, where they move from point A to point B. They moved to Arizona when he was young, and then they moved to California when he was young, a little later than that. So it in that regard, it's really cool too. So like the more that you watch this film and the more that you understand that these are the real things that happened to Steven Spielberg, it makes it an even more interesting film, because if you know Spielberg's filmography, he's obviously a at this point a cinematic legend, if not a genius, right? So you're watching somebody as a kid become this thing, and we've seen movies where they do it with other art forms, and I think this is a really cool one to see unravel in the film directing genre. So throughout the film, Sammy Fableman shoots a bunch of homemade movies, and over time they get better and better, and he gets more and more creative, coming up with what amounts to his own special effects and his own creations. And what another thing that's cool, like these are all the films, and in a lot of cases, almost shot for shot, that he made as a kid. They recreate them for this, and so the quality is better in the film than the quality of the things that he made in real life. But a lot of them are the same stories. He when he was very first starting, after he did the train crash thing, he would film around his house with his sisters. They were his main characters, his actors, they were his crew. So when he was doing stuff, he was just using the things that he had available to him and just kind of never stopped. And so as he started to gain friends as he got older, and get to know people, he made more exciting films. He used to do adventure, like westerns almost, with his friends, and that was really cool to see in the film. And then at one point he writes this war drama, about World War II, and this is a film that he made in real life. It was 40 minutes long. As you watch it, it's the things that he comes up with in the film for his special effects. So it's setting dust on top of a board, so when somebody runs over it, it looks like it's an explosion, people fall down. He uses some fake blood in it in some really fun ways. He sets firecrackers in places and times them so they look like bullets are going off. It's really cool to see the evolution of just film in general. I mean, if you took Steven Spielberg out of it, you're looking at how new things are brought to the screen in ways that make them look like this, but they're actually this. So there's a whole bunch of misdirection there with your brain. And so the film that he created was called Escape to Nowhere. And again, it was a 40-minute war film. When he made it with his friends, they won first prize in the statewide competition in real life. I don't think they cover the award-winning aspect of it in the movie, but it's definitely, you watch this film, and again, we're watching the new recreation of the original film, but they tried to keep it very accurate. And in that regard, you can see where something like Saving Private Ryan came to be. he watched what he knew about the war. He made the film that he wanted to make in this 40-minute film, and it was really interesting to see him kind of direct kids and stuff like that. So it was super neat. At the end of the film, we see him go and sit down with a director, John Ford, who directed just a ton of movies at the time, big time director. And I don't want to give anything away in the scene, but it's a great scene, and it's really funny because there's not a lot to it. He gets 5 minutes with this guy. This guy is super short and brisk with him, but Spielberg has said that as far as he can remember, that scene is word for word, nothing more, nothing less than what happened in real life. So that, again, it's something that's really cool to watch, to see, the genesis of Steven Spielberg as we know him. Some other little gotchas, in the film that came from real life. At one point in the movie, his mom is coping with a bunch of stuff going on, and she comes home with a monkey. And that seems like something that would be a throw in for the film to show how crazy and wacky his mom was. But that actually happened. His mom actually brought a monkey home in real life. It's so neat to see this unravel in a way that shows us what the life of this guy that we all kind of look at as a genius, and what got him there. And it's interesting too, because at one point in the film, he's all but ready to give up filmmaking. Right around the beginning of his high school days, he's burnt out. He is not feeling it. He moved to California. He doesn't really know anybody. There's a couple other reasons that I don't want to give away in the film that drive him to kind of give up. And you can see where that almost happened in real life. And he said, he finally had to sit down and really look at himself and realize that he had to do this. He had to become a filmmaker. He had the drive. He had to do it, and that's how it went. So, going through it, there's two sides to this film for me, and they're both incredible. One is just the film itself. So if you just watch this as a film, you don't know who Steven Spielberg was. This is a really beautiful film about a young man finding what he wants to do at an early age, and then pushing for it and fighting for it and teaching himself how to become the best that he can be at that, and fighting for it. He gets out of high school, and he doesn't just walk into a world where he's automatically the one of the greatest directors of all time. He's nobody. He's having a hard time getting a job. He can't sit down with anybody and talk to them. And that's kind of almost refreshing. Like, you don't want to just see a story where somebody says, this is my dream, and then they just go achieve it and it's super easy. No, this kid really, really works for it and does a great job. And the other side to this is the accuracy of the film. I know when you have Steven Spielberg making it, you expect it to be pretty accurate, but maybe, some embellishments. And I'm sure there are, but reading up on it and looking at the way things went and how they filmed the student films or the home films that he made, it seems like it's not embellished a whole lot. And I think that almost makes the first part of it even more interesting, because you're really seeing what this kid did to get to where he is, and get to the guy that made Indiana Jones, and the guy that made the Goonies, and the guy that made all these films. And it's really great. And the story is really wonderful. The acting is great. There's a whole lot of heart in this film. You got a great cameo short scene appearance from Judd Hirsch, who plays he plays Uncle Boris. And so he's, I think, his mom's Uncle Boris. And so, he has a really great appearance where he's just a little nutty and does some of the stuff that Judd Hirsch is really great at. And it really works. He does a fantastic job. And it's just there's not really any flaws in this movie. Like I looked it up on Rotten Tomatoes, and it's a 92% on the critic side, 83% on the audience side. And I think that's great. I think I actually lean a little closer to the critics on this one. It does have its slow moments, like it's not the most fast-paced action film for sure. You get a little more action and excitement when he hits the later part of the high school portion of his life, and I think that stuff really works well. But it makes sense too, right? I mean, he's not an action star. He's not, filming big action movies, although the things that he make kind of almost fall into that category as he's making them. So, I can see where, audiences maybe wanted a little more action and didn't want it to be a little slow, but I think the slowness worked, especially when you understand what the material is. So that's about it. That's about all I've got. I don't know of anything new coming out this week, so we'll see. I'll probably jump through some of the streaming stuff. I think Extraction 2 is out, so I'll probably try and catch that before next week. I'll get caught up on some of the other stuff that's still out there. Hopefully something new is out. And hopefully, so you guys can get a little variety, I will have at least Andrew, maybe Pete, back next week. There's a good chance that sometime next month we'll get Jen back in the rotation for the show. She's been busy as a dance mom, so we got to respect that. Always kids first, family first. So we definitely believe in that over here. So with that, I will say thank you for watching. I hope you have a great week, and we will see you next time.